Feminism is a big problem in China now, not only for men, but also for society and the country, and even for women themselves. Feminism that advocates for women's rights in China now gradually grows into female privilege. They advocate the idea that all men are bad, that women should hate men, that women should refuse to get married and have children. Many women are increasingly arrogant, such as this one in pick one. She drove on the wrong side of the road and slapped the male driver across from her more than 10 times on the face. Socialism advocates for women's liberation, but it is by no means this way. Feminism is an important reason for China's population decline. Besides, some feminist organizations in China have a clear pro-Western and anti-CPC government tendency. I strongly suspect that some feminist organizations have Western funding behind them. In fact, feminism also causes more women to suffer. On the train, there are now fewer Chinese men who would actively help women carry heavy bags. When women hit men first, there are more and more Chinese men choosing to fight back. 10 years ago, it was hard to imagine Chinese men would hit women in whatever cases. More importantly, you can see that most voices support men to fight back under such videos. The impact of feminism on me personally is that in recent years, I have refused to talk to female subordinates in a closed room because I am afraid they will suddenly and inexplicably accuse me of sexual harassment. I, of course, would not do it, but I can feel that's a kind of danger, and to be honest, I don't trust they 100% would not do it. China should seriously face this issue. On the one hand, introducing foreign women to increase competition for Chinese women. More and more Southeast Asian girls are willing to marry Chinese men and have children. On the other hand, feminism, LGBT, and other ideas from the West should be restricted or at least not encouraged in China. You know, just when you wanted to be sympathetic to this guy, or at least try and see things from his point of view, he comes out as a full-blown Nazi. China's population is declining, and the proportion of men is higher than that of women. The introduction of foreign women can alleviate China's population problem, and I advocate prioritizing the introduction of Southeast Asian and overseas Chinese who have similar appearance and DNA to Chinese. However, I do not advocate for the introduction of foreign men. Oh, that's rich. So you can date our women, but we can't touch your women? Men usually have stronger nationalism and ideology, which may conflict with local Chinese and even cause social unrest. The babies of foreign mothers and Chinese men will grow up in China and will obviously fully integrate into Chinese society and become a complete Chinese. So, in other words, bro, you want to marry Southeast Asian women, but you don't want Southeast Asian men to come to China. In other words, you're no different from a white American Asian wife reactionary. But having said that, are there nuggets of truth in your analysis? Let's find out. Good afternoon from the cruel, heartless and oppressive capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur. Hope you're having an amazing day, because if you're having an amazing day, I'm having an amazing day. So recently there was a Twitter rant by this Chinese fellow
who was ranting about how Chinese women have been overtaken by feminism, which has spread like the plague in China. And as a result, Chinese men are moving in droves to Southeast Asia, places like Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam, in order to find wives, because apparently feminism has made Chinese women simply too insufferable. Now, I understand the guy who posted it was a reactionary, but there are some rather inconvenient little nuggets of truth in his diatribe. So, today we're going to talk about passport bros, not only in the dating market, but also ethnic passport bros. You ready? Let's go. Now, first of all, we need to clarify a couple of key terms. For example, what do we mean by a passport bro? Well, generally speaking, a passport bro is a chap from a more developed country who finds himself unable to have much luck with the opposite sex. And now, first of all, the passport bro is not to be confused with the sexpat, the sexpatriate, who only comes to underdeveloped societies like Southeast Asia. As you can see, we're still developing, but we're getting better, who comes to these places in order to have cheap sex. The passport bro is generally a man, not only from a Western country, but also from more developed and affluent Asian countries, like South Korea, for example, who find that they're not getting much luck with the women in their own societies, because the women in their societies they have overly high demands, and they have unrealistic expectations for men. That's from their point of view. Yeah, don't lambast me, feminists. I assure you, it will not go well if you lambast me. So, these men feel that by repatriating to a poorer society and finding a woman with more reasonable expectations, they will be able to get the life and wife and family that they desire, that was denied to them in their own societies. Of course, this trend has resulted in some rather tragic results. For example, the many abandoned Copino babies, if you don't mind me saying, of half Korean, half Filipino children who were abandoned by their Korean fathers. Because eventually their Korean fathers wanted to go back to Korea, because at the end of the day, still, they still felt that Philippines was culturally and basically personally incompatible with them. So I think we've clarified there is a difference between a sexpat and a passport bro. A sexpat is basically a man who fundamentally despises the people and culture of a third world country, but only goes there because he views the place as a large brothel. But a passport bro may genuinely have legitimate grievances. So I have to put this out there so that you don't think that I'm calling you a sexpat. If you happen to be a passport bro of any nationality. Mind you, not all passport bros are white Western men. There are also Asian passport bros, like Chinese fellas from Shanghai, who feel that the place has gotten too capitalistic for their liking. People have gotten too individualistic for their liking. And, well, the women have gotten too materialistic for their liking, as a result of a society becoming more prosperous. And there are also passport bros from Malaysia. If you go on Lawyat Forum, you have to be invited to get on that forum. I'm not part of that forum, but I do stalk that forum from time to time. You'll find there are also frustrated Chinese Malaysian fellows who have decided to move to Thailand or to Vietnam because they feel that the Chinese Amoys, or Malaysian Chinese women, are giving them a hard time in the dating market or are treating them like pigeons on the street. So, as you can see, the passport bro phenomenon is not something that you notice. It's not something that's exclusive to Western countries. Just a candid confession from me, but I too have considered becoming a domestic passport bro, to go to Malacca or Penang or Ipoh, one of the less developed towns in Malaysia compared to Kuala Lumpur, not because of women, but rather because I do not like Kuala Lumpur, which is a nasty and cruel and callous dog-eat-dog capitalist dictatorship. But I also feel that it would be unfair to impose myself on the people of Malacca, Ipoh or Penang just because I don't like Kuala Lumpur. I don't like the capitalistic state it's in, which is inevitable in any highly industrialized and developed city. You will find that people tend to become more selfish, individualistic, class conscious, or rather status conscious and materialistic. And yes, people are generally more pleasant in places that are less industrialized. That's a fact. And yes, the truth is that this is a hard pill to swallow for a lot of leftists, but there is a grain of truth in what these passport bros are saying when they say that women in developed societies have rather, I don't want to sound misogynistic, but have, how do we say? I don't want to say higher standards, but rather much more stringent expectations. As the German philosopher Karl Marx said, the bourgeoisie has torn from the family its sentimental veil and reduced it to a mere money relation. Well, in that sense, you could say that in highly industrialized capitalistic society, everything becomes a transaction. Friendship becomes a transaction, and even relationships become a transaction. There's a price for everything under capitalism, including love, which only goes to the highest bidder. So in that regard, the passport bros are really not wrong. However, the passport bros, while I can at least not dismiss their frustration, have unfortunately barked up the wrong tree by, for example, blaming feminism or blaming Western women or blaming East Asian women. The passport bros fail to acknowledge the elephant in the room, class society, which has led to their predicament in the first place. So as long as your assumptions about female nature are predicated upon the myth of hypergamy, which is a ridiculous concept, considering there are women in the world who marry low-status men, like the Scandinavian princess who married that African chap. Or was he African-American? I don't remember. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that people are products of their material conditions. What you think is hypergamy and what you think is basically female nature is fundamentally 1950s bourgeois values that people are conforming to. Okay? Many of these people who use terms like hypergamy or who use terms like alpha male or beta male believe that cavemen thousands of years ago lived like 1950s nuclear families in America, which nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the monogamous idea of one man, one woman is a very Western concept. Throughout history, most people were polyamorous, okay? There are some tribes in which, people do not have a set father and mother. That is to say that basically everyone screws everyone and nobody even knows who their father is, okay? So your idea of hypergamy is basically 1950s Western morality, Western capitalist morality. But capitalism, when it spreads around, it does happen to turn people more individualistic, more selfish, and more materialistic. And yes, under capitalism, people tend to look out for number one, or people tend to judge others on the basis of their status or wealth or superficial things, that is fundamentally a capitalist problem. Okay? So if you only focus on this band-aid of repatriating to another country to solve your dating woes, well, not only are you importing your culture of rugged capitalist individualism to another country, but you may find it so incompatible. You might be happy for a few years, right? Like those Korean men with the Filipino wives. You might be happy for a few years, finally getting a woman that you want. But it's likely that eventually you yourself will find that you are so culturally incompatible. You are so culturally incompatible with the people of a different culture that eventually you get divorced. And it's a very unhappy result for the children, isn't it? I know a passport bro from America. He's an African-American chap who is divorced from a Malaysian Indian woman. Sure, he might have been happy for a few years because in his own society, he wasn't able to get anybody, right? And because of his higher currency, a Malaysian Indian woman gave him a chance. But eventually, the culture is so incompatible, that the culture is so diametrically opposed, East and West, that eventually they had to get divorced for their sanity. And now he lives alone, the daughter lives with her mother, and that's basically a very common occurrence for people who are passport bros, or people who geomax and marry out when they go to different countries in order to, well, I don't want to say spite the women of their own community, but rather basically to try and find overseas what they could not find in their own country. The solution is not to try and run away from the women in your own community, unless of course you really like the culture in the other country, but it's likely that you prefer your own culture, right? I prefer my own culture. The solution is to eradicate class society. That is the only way, because when you put a band-aid like this, you basically make things harder for the guys in the other country, and you're basically not really solving the problem, right? You're not solving the problem because the problem is basically capitalism, class society. And it is very much like how the Zionists, who feel that they are oppressed and disrespected in their own Western countries, right? They might have legitimate reasons to feel that way. They probably do. But the solution is not to geomax over to Palestine. And I'm not comparing a passport bro to a Zionist. I'm just giving you an analogy. To geomax over to Palestine, to a place that is completely culturally alien to you, a European Jew. And then after that, because you find that you're so culturally incompatible with the people in the Middle East, you want your own westernized, gentrified pocket known as Israel. Why can't you just be a Palestinian Jew? Well, another problem I can see with passport bros is because if they're so culturally incompatible with the locals, even if they get a wife and children, they will expect the wife and children to assimilate into their culture, and they will form pockets. Because when you get into an intercultural relationship, there's a chance that somebody will have to assimilate. And usually it's the passport bros with the stronger currency, who come from a country with a stronger currency, who expect their wife to assimilate. And so the children may end up losing the other side of themselves, you know. That's another criticism that I can level, you know. Unless, of course, you want to assimilate into her culture, then there's no problem. If your passport bro wants to assimilate into the Asian woman's culture, then that's not a problem at all. Then you live in her society, you become one of us, and you'll be happy. But it's likely that many people who go abroad, whether that be Westerners or even East Asians, who look for Southeast Asian women, they still want to give their children an upbringing that they were given. The Chinese fella, for example, who marries a Southeast Asian woman, would like his children probably to identify as Chinese. He'd like to give them a Chinese upbringing, and there's a good chance that he doesn't want them to identify as Southeast Asian, right? And it's the same that I say to Asian American or Western Asian fellas who feel that they are disrespected in a Western society. That is probably true, but at the same time, you don't solve the problem by repatriating to the East, where you are so culturally incompatible with the people in the East that you are as different as night and day. I have had Asian Americans calling me whitewashed because I don't conform to their stupid model minority stereotype, right? I don't conform to their stupid artificial model minority concept of what an Asian person is supposed to be. So the reality is that these people will not admit, or they cannot admit, that they are the whitewashed ones. They are conforming to an American idea of what an Asian person is supposed to be. And the reality is that if they came back here, they would not get along with many people, right? That's why they never actually test their theory of coming back. So the reality is it's a tough situation, because on the other hand, while I'm not dismissing their grievances, that Asians are disrespected in Western countries, just like Jewish people also face discrimination in Western countries, the goal is not to impose themselves on the global South or on their so-called country of origin. Just like Liberia was a disaster, right? The house slaves went to Liberia and then they bullied the local African people. You do not dump people, or you do not expect people to geomax to their continent of origin just because they are unable to fit in a Western society, no matter how hard they try. It is up to the Western countries to abolish class society and the contradictions of class society and form a socialist society where people will all be treated as equal, so that your minorities will not have a need. They will not feel that they must return to a motherland they never knew. So likewise, like I said, the abolition of class society will also liberate men and women to pursue romantic love and not transactional love, which is the zeitgeist of our times, because we live under capitalism. When we abolish class society, people will have the material conditions to comfortably start families, and people will be free to pursue romantic love without women commodifying themselves by putting a price on themselves, by saying that you need to make so and so in order to date me, or men commodifying themselves by turning themselves into human ATMs. That will all end once we put an end to class society. But I don't think it's productive to finger point and blame women of any particular race or culture, because this is universal. It happens universally under capitalism, and the only way you're going to fix it is to end class society and put an end to the bourgeoisie, which basically created this superstructure in the first place. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.